Snow crusted over his face like glass. Beck Weathers opened his eyes to silence. No wind, no movement, only the hiss of air leaking from his mask. His hands were frozen stiff inside his gloves. His legs wouldn't move. For a moment, he didn't know if he was still alive. He was lying on Everest's south col, more than 26,000 feet up, inside the death zone, where the air itself tries to kill you. Around him, the mountain was buried in white. The storm had passed, leaving only wreckage and silence. The others were gone. He had been left behind, thought to be dead. Beck forced himself onto his knees, then onto his feet. Every breath burned like fire. He couldn't see the tents through the glare, but he knew they were down there, somewhere below the ridge. If he stayed, he'd freeze where he stood. If he moved, he might still have a chance. By the next afternoon, a lone figure stumbled out of the blizzard and into camp. Against every imaginable odds, Beck Weathers had come back from the dead. It was May 1996, and Mount Everest, the world's highest and most coveted mountain, was about to deliver its deadliest lesson. In the spring of 1996, Everest had become a business. No longer the realm of elite mountaineers, it was open to anyone with money, ambition, and a dream of standing on top of the world. Commercial expeditions offered guided climbs, fixed ropes, bottled oxygen, and Sherpa support. It was called the Age of Guided Adventure. Two of the biggest names in the business were there that season. Rob Hall, the meticulous New Zealander who ran adventure consultants, known for his discipline and professionalism, and Scott Fischer, the American climber behind Mountain Madness, charismatic, daring, and famous for pushing limits. Both men were respected. Both had summited before. But this time, each had clients depending on them. Clients who had paid as much as $65,000 for their chance at the top. By early May, 4 major teams, including Hall's, Fischer's, a Taiwanese expedition, and a South African group, were camped at 26,000 feet on the South Col. The weather forecast looked perfect. Winds would drop, skies would clear. The plan was simple. Leave Camp 4 at midnight, reach the summit by early afternoon, and descend before nightfall. It looked like everything was lining up for success. But on Everest, good weather can turn faster than thought, and too many people were now chasing the same narrow window. At 11:30 p.m. on May 10th, dozens of climbers switched on their headlamps and stepped into the darkness. Their lights formed a single glowing line that snaked up the icy slope. A human chain inching toward the summit ridge. The air was so thin that each step felt like running a marathon. Over 30 climbers were on the same route, far too many for a mountain where the narrow sections allowed only one person to move at a time. Every stop meant minutes of waiting in minus 30-degree cold, losing strength and oxygen. By dawn, the first groups reached a place called the Balcony at about 27,500 feet. Here, they were supposed to clip into fixed ropes, safety lines that Sherpas normally install before summit day. But something was wrong. The ropes were missing. Rob Hall's voice came over the radio. "The lines aren't fixed. We'll have to do it ourselves." For nearly an hour, guides and Sherpas stood in the open, hands freezing, setting ropes across the exposed slope. Behind them, climbers waited in line, motionless, burning precious oxygen. Above, the sky began to change. The horizon darkened, clouds rolling in from the west. By the time the ropes were ready, the schedule had already slipped 2 hours behind. Still, no one turned back. The higher they climbed, the slower they moved. At 28,000 feet, every breath was a struggle. The air held only a third of the oxygen found at sea level. Some climbers were already out of bottled air, but pushed on anyway. They'd come too far to stop. Just below the summit ridge stood the Hillary Step, a near-vertical rock wall, 40 feet high, coated in ice. It was the final barrier before the summit. Normally, it took minutes to climb, but today, the step became a traffic jam. Dozens of climbers were lined up, waiting their turn on the rope. Each person had to clip in, climb, and unclip before the next could go. Those waiting stood still in the freezing wind, watching the minutes vanish. At 1:07 p.m., the first summit success came. Russian guide Anatoli Boukreev. Behind him, journalist John Krakauer reached the top at 1:12. They looked out across the endless Himalaya, Nepal to one side, Tibet to the other, and for a brief moment, the world was silent. One by one, others followed. Climbers from the United States, New Zealand, Japan, and Taiwan. But as the clock ticked past 2 p.m., the turnaround time, dozens were still on the ridge. That was the rule. If you weren't summiting by 2 o'clock, you turned back. But nobody moved. The weather still looked fine. The summit so close. Just a few hundred feet more. And that's when the mountain made its move. By mid-afternoon, the blue sky began to fade. Thin wisps of cloud rose from the valleys below, swirling upward like smoke. Within minutes, the upper slopes disappeared into a whiteout. Temperatures plunged. Winds reached hurricane force. The ropes vanished under new snow, and climbers lost sight of one another. At 3:45 p.m., Scott Fischer reached the summit, utterly exhausted. He radioed down, "God, I'm tired." It was the last clear transmission anyone would hear from him. On the ridge below, Rob Hall was still climbing with his client, Doug Hansen, a postal worker from Seattle. Doug had been turned back the year before, just short of the top, and this time he was determined to make it. Rob knew he was struggling, but refused to abandon him. By 4 p.m., Doug finally reached the summit. He collapsed to his knees. Hall congratulated him quietly, then told base camp they were turning back. But Doug couldn't stand. Hall radioed down again. "Doug's gone. I can't get him down without oxygen." The wind drowned his words. The temperature fell below -60 degrees. Visibility, 0. Far below, another disaster was unfolding. A group of climbers, Americans, Europeans, and Sherpas, had missed the route in the storm. Disoriented and blinded by snow, they stopped to wait for daylight. They didn't realize they were only 400 yards from Camp 4. They huddled together in the dark, beating their arms and legs to stay alive. Beck Weathers, who had been waiting since morning, was still standing, blind from snow blindness, half frozen, yet refusing to lie down. Beside him, Yasuko Namba from Japan collapsed in the snow. Inside the camp, those who had made it back alive listened to the storm pound their tents. 19 people were missing. No one could see a thing. And that's when Anatoli Boukreev decided to go back out. He zipped up his down suit, grabbed a headlamp and rope, and stepped into the darkness. He crawled and shouted through the storm, searching for movement. He found 2 climbers half buried in snow and dragged them, one by one, back to camp. Then he went back out again, 3 times. By dawn, he had saved at least 3 climbers, possibly more. He could have died with them, but he didn't. He refused to. When the sun rose on May 11th, the storm had passed. The mountain was silent again, as if nothing had happened. But the slopes were littered with wreckage, torn tents, scattered packs, and bodies frozen where they'd fallen. 8 climbers were dead. More were missing. At 6 a.m., Rob Hall was still alive, clinging to his radio. His voice was faint but clear. "This is Rob. I'm stuck near the south summit. My hands are frozen. Doug's gone." Base camp leaned close to the radio, straining to hear through the static. "Rob, can you hear me?" "Hold on. We're sending help." But the help never came. The storm had buried the ropes and blinded the rescuers below. They patched a line through to New Zealand, where Rob's wife, Jan, was waiting. 7 months pregnant, she pressed the receiver to her ear as the Himalayan wind howled through the speakers. "Hold on, Rob," she whispered. "We're waiting for you." There was a pause, long, quiet, and final. Then Rob spoke softly. "I love you. Please don't worry too much." The line went dead. That was the last time anyone heard his voice. It was May 1996, and Mount Everest, the world's highest and most coveted mountain, was about to deliver its deadliest lesson. Hours later, a Sherpa team went searching across the ridge. They found Scott Fischer still clipped to the rope, his body half buried in snow. He had died sitting upright, his jacket open, one hand bare and frozen. Higher up, near the south summit, they located Rob Hall's body, lying on his side, partly covered by drifted snow. He was still wearing his radio. But down below, a miracle was happening. In the early afternoon, someone saw movement on the snowfield. It was Beck Weathers, walking. He had been left for dead the night before, twice. But somehow, after lying unconscious for more than 15 hours in subzero cold, he woke up. Disoriented and frostbitten, he stumbled toward the tents, arms outstretched, face black with frostbite. His survival defied logic. Rescuers pulled him into a tent, certain he would die before morning. But he didn't. He became the face of survival and the cost of Everest. The story spread fast. 8 dead on Everest, read the headlines. The world wanted to know who was responsible. Some blamed Rob Hall for not enforcing his turnaround time. Others blamed Scott Fischer for allowing too many clients too high, too late. Critics blamed the commercialization of Everest itself, the idea that money could buy experience. The debate turned bitter. John Krakauer, who had been on Hall's team as a journalist, wrote Into Thin Air, his version of the events. In it, he criticized Anatoli Boukreev for descending ahead of his clients. Boukreev responded in his own book, The Climb, defending his decisions and reminding readers that he had saved lives when others couldn't move. There were no easy answers. Everyone on that mountain faced impossible choices and paid a price. The physical toll was immense. Beck Weathers lost both hands and his nose to frostbite. Yasuko Namba, the oldest Japanese woman to reach the summit, never came back. Mike Groom and several Sherpas suffered severe frostbite, and dozens more carried psychological scars that would never fade. In the years that followed, Everest only grew more crowded. More climbers, more guides, more lines of traffic inching up the same narrow ridge. Yet every season, veterans of 1996 returned to the same conclusion. It wasn't just the storm that killed people. It was the decisions made before the storm began. Rob Hall once said, "The mountain doesn't care about your dreams. It will still be here next year. You might not." The 1996 disaster changed Everest forever. Turnaround times grew stricter. Radios improved. Weather forecasts became part of every climb. But the mountain itself never changed. The same winds still tear across the South Col. The same narrow ridge still leads into the thin air above the Hillary Step. And somewhere near the south summit, beneath a drift of snow, Rob Hall still rests, the guide who refused to leave his client behind. His final radio call still echoes through documentaries and climbing halls, a reminder that even the strongest can vanish in a few wrong hours. Nearly 30 years later, Everest remains what it has always been: patient, unchanging, indifferent. Still, it draws them in. Some reach the top, some turn back, and some, like Rob Hall and Scott Fischer, never leave. If you enjoy stories of deadly mountains and the people who face them, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. There's always another climb waiting.